Hello and welcome to Dualistic Unity Raw, episode 42. I am doing my best to keep things light, no matter how heavy some conversations get, no matter how much it seems like, what could we possibly do about everything that's going on in this reality, in this system? It helps to remember that you are this reality. You are this system. So as you keep things light and keep your idea of yourself light, the system gets just a little bit lighter. And through that recognition, it really does help me to maintain that degree of lightness, humor, laughter amongst the chaos and darkness that seems to be surrounding us at times, but comes back to you and the recognition that you're it. So as you change, everything changes.
And I am working on keeping things heavy to some degree. And it's just because I've went so far in the other direction of recognizing what is and how we are all connected that, frankly, I have no fear about what we're doing moving forward. There is not one single part of me that lacks faith in our ability to move forward and grow and adapt and learn as divinity itself, as reality, however you'd like to put it. I am not concerned, but I do recognize that there is a lot of suffering that we experience as we go through this transition. And so I remember that to some people, this is really quite heavy. And I keep that in mind, but not to everyone. And it certainly doesn't have to be.
So with all of that said, I hope you enjoy this live stream that is Dualistic Unity Raw, episode 42.
Monday morning, off to the races. I do want to do a couple of announcements, but I'll hold off. I'll wait until we've gotten underway, as it were, and established some steam. What would you like to chat about this morning?
I actually was curious your thoughts with, and I know you kind of like keep everything light with the state of the world and the system and et cetera, but with the with the all the banking stuff happening right now, I'm just curious, and I know you're probably not necessarily in the weeds, especially with everything we have going on with like current situation at all, but just in general, like I've talked to some people about just the way the Fed does shit, just like higher level kind of situation. To me, it seems like inevitably, like shit's gonna crumble. It's just a house of cards they keep adding bullshit to, and like there's no way that doesn't collapse. There's no way that that's sustainable. And I've asked people like who don't necessarily see that. I'm like, do you think this is a long-term situation? Do we think we can keep doing the things that we're doing? And with like, I don't fully understand the like raising, lowering rates to manipulate inflation versus boost the economy, that whole kind of lever pulling thing. But that just sounds like a total load of horse shit, like going back and forth, kind of manipulating a market like that seems like something that couldn't possibly continue for very long. And it seems more and more like it may happen sooner rather than later. Like they can't maintain that sort of false control forever. And yet they continue to try to, and they keep like kicking the dead situation along more and more. But I don't know, like, whether it's hyperinflation or what happens, it seems like shit's going to go down inevitably. It's just a matter of not really if, but when.
This is what we're starting our Monday with? All right, fair enough. There's a lot of ways that we can take this. Yeah, the economy, our current financial system is destined to fail. It has been since it became a credit debit system in the early 70s, late 60s, when it switched from the gold standard. But I mean, even then it was starting to get watered down, but at least then, it was based on some degree of physical asset. It wasn't just, monopoly money, as it were. But, ever since fractional reserve banking, things have gotten out of whack because In fractional reserve banking, they only have to have a fraction of the money to keep lending that out, right? To just keep lending and lending and lending. But that's not really the worst part about it. The worst part about it is the fact that all money that's created, all the money that's printed and put into circulation is done so at interest. So all of the money in circulation, all of it, 100% of the money that is out there right now, if you were to take it all and put it together in a big bag, wouldn't be enough to pay the debt on it. Think about that. There isn't enough money in existence to pay the debt on that money. You have to borrow more money. So it's a never-ending cycle. It will continue to balloon and get bigger. And so this is why you have the raising and lowering of interest rates, specifically in terms of loans to the bank and to other banks and whatnot. But it goes kind of down the pipe from there to mortgages and other kind of loans and agreements and so on and so forth. But so that whole thing. So if you look at the money supply, because every dollar printed lowers the value of every other dollar in circulation. But that's not the only way that money is created. Like actually physical money, your dollar bills are a very small percentage of the money that's actually in existence. Most of the money in existence is digital. Most of the money in existence is just exists as mortgages, as loans, as agreements between banks, things like that. Penal sums are the creation of money. So every court ruling is the creation of money. Every time you go to the bank and you borrow money, they're not looking and borrowing. You're not actually borrowing it from them. They're creating it as soon as you've taken it out. All right. So each and every time we're just ballooning the money supply. And sometimes they want to encourage that to drive the economy as well as to fill their own pockets. And so they will lower the interest rates and make loans more available, which they say, you know, kind of makes business boom. But what it really does is push the economy to create a bunch of shit that it may not really need out of greed. Because now, oh, we got all this money, we got to build these giant projects, we got to do all these things and so on and so forth. And so what's interesting about that, and somebody else brought this up recently, and it's true if you want to simplify it this way. If you think about it, when they lend out money like that, or when they make money more available, they are making jobs easier to give because they're making it possible to pay more people by just throwing out more money, right? And yet when they raise their interest rates, because that's how they're trying to control inflation, right? They raise the interest rates so everybody has to start pushing money back in towards the banks. That's what brings it out of the general population. So they're trying to decrease inflation by basically charging people more money on the money that they put out there already. Well, what happens when you do that, when you raise interest rates on mortgages and loans and lines of credit and all this other stuff? Businesses have to shrink. People have to get fired. So not only are they decreasing inflation, they're causing unemployment.
So either way, there's massive repercussions to, because like if inflation increases and unemployment decreases, it's like, yes, there's more people working, sure, more people making money, but is it almost like always sort of in balance with inflation? Like, yeah, more people have jobs, but now their money's worth even less.
Correct. Now, if that were to be just left alone the way it is, that'd be one thing, right? Because maybe you could make that work, just ballooning and contracting and ballooning and contracting. But while that is happening, what you're also having is the reallocation of wealth from the rich, or from the poor to the rich, right? And so you have people who are still working for minimum wage, which is below the living wage, right? So they have to have 2 and 3 jobs, while the rich are claiming the biggest profits they've ever had. So you see how all of a sudden all that excess money is being pooled to one side, right? And what's worse is that this mechanism of inflating and then deflating the economy is a mechanism of basically pumping the wealth out of one side into the wealthy, because they know how to do it. It's their game. It's been their game forever. Jekyll Island was really them coming together and going, can we do this? Well, we own enough politicians and the president. Yeah, we can do this. And they did. They created the central banks, the Federal Reserve. It's a hell of a story.
Yeah, it's really fucking dark, like really, really brutal when you start thinking about it. But and they're able to sort of distract people enough to think that it's like they have people's best interests in mind, because it's not even like because a lot of the politicians are very caught up on, you know, tax the rich more. You know, you have AOC going to that event with the dress like tax the rich, that, you know, the event is just a fucking, I don't even know what event it was, but it's like not necessary, you know, and that whole thing. So it makes me like, how deep does it go beyond that? Like, what are your thoughts then on the narrative of, you know, just tax the rich? That's like the answer to everything. If we just took that money from them, we could put it into other things. But in the system, the way I'm starting to understand it more, it's like with the deeper rooted stuff, like that money would get pulled out anyway. Say, for example, like every billionaire got taxed 80% or something, and they just took all that money, and I don't know what exactly they would do with that, but say they were actually did have good intentions with it, and moved it exactly like laughable, but they had good intentions and moved it into actually helping lower income people. Like, how it seems like with the way the system is running, that that money would get sucked out of them pretty quick anyway. And so those making the decisions, you know, the Jekyll Island crowd, like, is are they even a part of that whole tax the rich narrative? Like, would they even be taxed? Like, is there even a way to do that? Because income tax used to not be even a thing. And so it seems like another sort of facade, not facade, but I think you know what I mean with like not the answer. And yet that's the narrative push. Like, oh, if we just tax people more, then everything will work out. But it seems like that's completely separate from like what's actually happening, the system.
Because they know it'll never happen. Like it's never going to happen with our current mentality. And the reason being is that there's too many people who want to be rich. And every person who wants to be rich is looking at the threat of more taxes in the future going, that's not fair. And that's a lot of the argument. That's what it is. And that's the big thing, is that we all want to be these rich people. We often talked about this, but I don't think it comes down to, you know, the rich and the poor, because I think that that gap's going to continue to grow because it's part of our system, right? Like, let's just say we were to tax billionaires at 80%, take the majority of their money, and we put it back into the system. What do you think they're going to do with that? Do you not think that they're going to pay for government contracts that go to specific companies that are going to make more profit on those contracts and thus line the pockets of the politicians to begin with? It's just going to be the same shell game under a different mask. It always is. Like, there's God, I wish I could remember what the website is right now. If anybody knows it, put it in the chat. We're basically in the US, all of the government officials are now forced to disclose their investments as of, I think, last year or something like that. So there's a website you can go and find out what Nancy Pelosi has invested in this year, what every other senator and congressman has invested in this year. And you watch how often they are investing in things that are very much being swayed by political decisions that they know the outcome for. This has always been the case. It will always be the case. If we take money out of rich people and put it into the government, that government is going to find a way to give it back to those goddamn rich people. I promise you. And because the government is run by people who want to be rich people. And it's just a matter of time until that carrot gets big enough that you sell out, especially in a mentality where you think that your value is measurable, that somehow you are more by having more. And that's what's got us, is this mentality. Because remember, this money thing, this financial collapse, this is just a phase to something else. Everything else is, or everything is. David Icke, regardless of some of his other stuff, makes a great point about how the common strategy, and I know we talked about this in season 1, is problem, reaction, solution. Introduce a problem, wait for the reaction, and then introduce a solution that benefits you more than others that you've been waiting to introduce since you created the problem to begin with. Every problem is an opportunity, and that's how they look at it. So this financial collapse or this financial crisis is going to cause more desperation, which is going to drive up crime, which is going to drive up the division, which is going to drive up the mental health problem, which is going to make people just crazy and uncertain and willing to join a social credit system that offers them rewards for performing adequately.
I just got chills down my spine. God damn. I know you've been through all the
I want to
fucking...
just hold on 1 second because we had a question. Somebody just got a bunch of ads on Twitch, and I discovered something today. If you are a subscriber on Twitch, which is a paid subscription, I don't think it's much per month. I honestly don't know, but there's no ads for paid subscribers on Twitch. So I just wanted to mention that. Back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, definitely hop in that subscription if you don't want ads. I think does YouTube have less ads, or
they still have ads?
Okay. All right. Never mind. Okay. So I know you've been through, the gauntlet of the depths and darkness and greed of the system, but I'm still learning about it. But it's so with and that last part with the social credit system, like that seems it makes me like sick to my stomach that people are going to willingly just run to that and think that it's like a good thing. Like that video, that fucking World Economic Forum video of them monitoring your brainwaves at work so they can see what emotions you're embodying and whether or not you're likely doing work or daydreaming about something, and then like monitor that and talk to you about it, like basically be inside of your mind to a degree. Fucking scary, but there's people who are hype about that. Like that's fucking so frightening. And so with the social credit system, like central bank digital currency, they're trying to push that, and I'm sure they're going to be interconnected if they're able to run with it, but they're pushing that like it's an alternative to Bitcoin. And I'm, I like Bitcoin. We'll see what ends up happening with all of that. I see it as an alternative, but at the same time, I'm curious your thoughts on that. I know we talked about that a little bit with Sean Webb in that episode. But it seems like, central bank digital currency, things like that, they're pushing that as like, oh, it's like Bitcoin, but it's controlled and it's safer and blah, blah, blah. And it's like everything that Bitcoin was made to counter. Yeah. And so with inflation, central bank digital currency, like, as you said before, the physical dollars out there aren't that high of a percentage. Like we already have digital currency essentially. And now they're pushing this thing as if it's like better for us. It's the future, and they can inflate the fuck out of that too. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. It's monopoly money just the same. And so it just, it seems like
they're offering us what we think we want under the guise of it's the same thing as always, right? It's like, digital currency is hot now. Everybody kind of wants it. It's like, perfect. We can give you that with our guarantee that we'll take care of it. And of course, people want to believe in the system because the alternative, as you're recognizing right now, is a certain degree of terror. The alternative to believing in this system is to recognize that it's not really here for you right now. And that's uncomfortable. We don't want to take that in. We don't want to take that in. We want to focus on our comforts. But I just want to toss in this, okay? In 2005, I think it was. This is how far this has been coming. I've been watching this come for a while. There was a club in Florida, I think it was, that was basically experimenting with RFID, right? Basically radio frequency ID. And it was like the size of a rice grain, a grain of rice. And you just had to have it basically injected underneath your skin. To get into the club, people did it. People did it. A lot of people did it. Okay. And then years later, a little bubble around of a tumor basically forming, right? Because of the RFID, because it was still, fairly new technology, or at least this was, or maybe the club was just cheap. I don't know. The point is that, people are willing to do a lot of stupid shit just to get what they want. Just to go to the club? Think about that. Like, there is a point in our life where that actually becomes like the biggest priority. Got to get out with my friends. We are so easy to manipulate at that point. So easy. And they know it, right? It's not even like they have to try, right? We are in a mentality where our biggest ambition is to feel better. All they have to do is scare us enough and then offer us a way to feel better. We're in. We just saw that. We just saw that.
Yeah, it really is frightening, and like that puts things into perspective, because you see that it's as much. Yeah, sure, the system's fucked, but like so are we and our priorities. And so, like, you want to be mad at the system, but we are the system, and like we very much are the system, and it utilizes our fucking insecurities to a T. Like, it does a great job of utilizing the things that frighten us, the things we're afraid of, the things that we feel like we need that we don't actually need. The whole thing we've been going back and forth with people about people pleasing being manipulative, and people are like, no, social interaction is a human need. Like, that mentality, when you're isolated for a while and then you're given a solution. Hey, we've been working on this thing for a couple months. It's probably good. Just do this, and then you can have all that need back.
Or sign this waiver.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about this just with everything going on right now. Not that, and it's funny because it's like, to me, my perspective is like, it's going on right now. I know it's been going on, but like, it's been going on for a very long time. And we just get like bubbles of, oh shit, maybe this is really, really fucked up. And something, yeah, I think that's probably the case too. And everything going on, like all the COVID stuff, and that side, the extreme, and with the big pharma. Pfizer has spent, I saw a stat, in the last 10 years, on average, they've spent like 2.7 billion on advertising for the last 10 years. So like 10 years ago, they spent 2.7 billion on advertising also. And so that whole side of things, and, the left side of the aisle being more,
not counting lobbyists. Let's remember, not counting lobbyists, because that is by far their most effective type of advertising. Lobbyists are the most effective type of advertising for companies and corporations and the industries as a whole, because they get to actually bribe politicians. They actually get to take them away on tropical vacations and pay the whole schwack and make sure that they all get all fucking partied and coked out and treated like gold. And then they're offered all kinds of fucking perks because, we're friends, right? They get donations to their campaigns. They get funding from all of these corporations. Nothing is being run for us. It's all being run for the sake of money and for the sake of those that are at the top. All of it. It's just that they need us to do the work.
oh man, yeah.
Would you like to lighten it up now?
No, I'm kind of liking this. So okay, so going back then to the currency side of things, like the whole thing with inflation, even if we move into like they're able to implement CBDCs and things like that, And like that's still able to be inflated super easily. They still have control of it. And then they're going to have, with the social credit system, they have like so much more control of everything that we do. Not control, but, impact on us, ability to monitor so much of our lives. Like, do you think that's actually going to go through? Like, do you think that's the next big thing that's going to come out of whatever the sort of banking collapse is inevitably going to happen here, which seems like, I don't know, it seems like it could happen then this year.
I do. I think that you're going to start seeing it in cities. Yeah, it's going to be way harder for them to enforce in like rural areas in the countryside and smaller towns and whatnot, because frankly, that mentality just doesn't mean shit. The farther out you go, the more people are just like, World Economic Forum, fuck those people, like, right? But in cities, there is this driving need to survive in a city. You're always running on the clock. You're always running the next paycheck. You're always running to get more stuff. You're always running to go out. It is just this machine that keeps you running. The pace in a city is insane compared to just living on your own in the middle of the forest. Like, it's such a giant contrast for sure. But when you're living in a city and you're competing for jobs against millions and millions of other people, and all of a sudden you get an offer to say, go work at one of the big banks. Let's just say it's one of the big banks, right? Or one of the bigger companies. And in order for you to get that job, they go, oh, by the way, one of our new requirements is this new earpiece that measures your brainwaves while you're working. It's one of the biggest banks in the world. You're being offered a salary with sick benefits. The alternative is going back to your part-time job working at, I don't know, serving coffee while you wait for that big opportunity. This is it. What are you going to do? Say no? Would you say no? No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. Within 2 years of that happening and people at those companies starting to use that, it would start to filter down, because now it's just good business practice, isn't it? It's all the Fortune 500 companies are doing it. So therefore, all the new companies got to start doing it, because that ensures that we're all going to work in the best way possible. And it would catch on real fast, because it's a great way to basically give them control over our productivity. So one thing they can't control right now, what we think, how well we're working based on how much we're thinking about our own lives. So yeah, no, I think it would absolutely catch on, and only because we would allow it to do so out of desperation. So it's justifiable. That's the worst thing.
Dude. I do want to keep talking about this though. Just a little longer. Maybe.
That's okay.
Maybe.
We can talk about this as much as you like. And it's just because I've been staring at this nightmare for a while. Yeah. But I just want to reiterate to everyone who may not be watching, that is just listening. I find all of this kind of entertaining to some degree. So take heart. Don't despair.
Yeah. So because that, as much as it seems like, oh, that's like, no way people will do that. Like in that situation, it's like, of course that person is going to do that. Of course they're going to say, yes, thank you, sir. May I have another? Like, right. And we saw it. I mean, we saw it with COVID, how easy it was to, and thinking back, because I put up a number of stories of just, like a doctor who wasn't following the narrative, and he was like, it didn't get banned by Instagram, but it was like, there may be on my Instagram story, it was blurred out, and it said, there is misinformation involved in this post. Like, are you sure you still want to see it? Blah, blah, blah. People had to like accept that in order to watch that video, because I got flagged by them.
Do you want to discuss the TikTok ban?
I mean, I haven't been keeping up with that so much, but I think that goes back to what we were talking about last week, where, the big corporations are able to control a narrative. And with TikTok, they can't control a narrative. Like with the East Palestine situation, there was a lot of information out there. There wouldn't have been without so many free market sort of things going on. Like people are getting their information from TikTok now. So is that what's, because I haven't been keeping up with recent stuff on that.
Basically, at the encouragement of Mark Zuckerberg and other tech giants that are in the pocket of, let's say, corporations and money and all that other stuff, have encouraged President Biden to shut down TikTok. They've been really making a solid point for shutting down TikTok. They've been trying for a while. Even here in Canada, they're talking about shutting down TikTok for government employees to make sure that they don't have it on their phone so they can't access it, that kind of thing. And it makes you wonder. Well, it doesn't even make you wonder. It makes you look at who's in control. It makes you go, oh, somebody's not liking the competition. One, right? Because that's it. You got to remember, like TikTok is killing it when it comes to competition with Facebook or any other platform, right? So that's where the power lies, in the larger corporations. And basically they're wanting to get rid of that competition. And they're going to tell you it's because of security concerns. The Chinese, it's the Chinese. And I just find it so goddamn funny, because we've been talking about recently doing a short retreat in Colorado in June. But of course, people from Canada can't come to the United States without being vaccinated and having proof of recent vaccination. And of course, that's not happening. But they just changed the law so people from China can come over to the United States. But, we're concerned about China.
Wait, so they dropped the ban strictly from people coming from China?
They dropped the requirement for testing, yeah.
Yeah. But not from anywhere else?
Correct.
Wait, so what the fuck? So, like, what's the thinking behind that?
It's political. Right now, shit's just going fucking sideways in terms of politics. Like everything that happened in Taiwan, that set up a whole other level of discussion in terms of politics. You got to remember, like, for Pelosi to go over and like openly recognize Taiwan as not being part of China, that's huge. Like that's a big deal. And there's all kinds of shit happening in the China Sea. Like China's been building a military for years. They have shit tons of planes, and now they're building aircraft carriers. And they're very much saying like the China Sea is ours. It's ours. And for years, the American military and their arsenal has basically been holding that at bay, saying, no, we police these waters. Right. But that balance of power is shifting, as well as the world reserve currency. You got to remember, like after World War II, the United States really did reign supreme in terms of industry, in terms of control, military might, all of that stuff. It's the reason that they called the shots. It's the reason that everything was basically centered around the United States. The United Nations is located in the United States. World Health Organization, I believe, is in the United States. Like almost everything of significant power is located in the States, and it's because they were the dominant superpower. But that's changing. Like all the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and I think Venezuela, maybe that doesn't fit in the acronym. Anyway, they're all creating their own currency. They're creating their own reserve currency, and they've done this. I think it was as of this year that they actually have implemented it. So they're finding a way to interact with one another. All of these large powerhouse countries that create oil and so on and so forth are moving away from the US dollar, which is going to undercut the dollar. China itself has been owning US debt for years and has started unloading it. Right. So the balance of power in the world is shifting in a way that nobody else is aware of, because we don't watch things on that level. We're too busy worried about the price of fucking bread. Right. And of course we are. Of course we are.
It's like it's almost like everything's so well timed. Not that it's in place like that, but just with everything that we focus on in the US, like the dominant narratives of things being like very fucking superficial identity based stuff, like what people call you, for example. Like that is one of our big focuses in this country, is stuff like that. And like that, it's almost like that. And we had that whole conversation about how it is rooted in capitalistic privilege, like those ideas and desires to be just fucking called a certain thing. And when you zoom out to like all this shit going on and all the shit with China and BRIC and all that stuff like that. It's wild that that's where our focus is on that. But at the same time, it's not like it makes total sense. That's where our priorities lie, is how we're perceived by people. Like we're really, really deep into this illusion. It makes me wonder, like in the US, is the illusion almost deeper among the vast majority that allows us to be so easily both manipulated and probably fucking taken over pretty soon? Whereas sure, in like China, maybe those at the top are very caught up in the illusion, but those below almost, they don't have the like time and the space to be too caught up in the illusion. Like they're too focused on, like we were in hunter-gatherer days, on fucking like surviving.
I wish that was the case. Like I wish it was the case that it's just the US. It's not. This is a global pandemic in terms of egotism. Like this is the biggest problem. Like, perfect example. There was somebody who ended up buying a pair of sneakers and realizing that those sneakers came from a sweatshop. And they got very upset about this, and they did their research and they went over to the country where the sweatshop was located, and they went and they tracked down the people who worked at the sweatshop, and it was children working at the sweatshop. And they asked, like, doesn't it bother you that they're doing this? And they're like, no, because soon I'll have my own pair. And that's kind of the point. Like, we are caught in this mentality of accumulation, of acquisition, of trying to evaluate ourselves. It's global, it's everywhere. And the only thing that's really changed is the spectrum, right? Like in China, sure, there are a lot of people in poverty, but there are a lot of people who are also straight up egotistical. And this is true for everyone, right? This is true across the world because it is our common mentality. It's just how it's filtered through the culture and how it's filtered through the government, that kind of thing. Like, give you an example. In China, there are people who are questioning the system. There are people who want to speak up. There was an example a couple of years ago of a school, of a grade school that collapsed and killed a bunch of children that were in the school. And it's because it just wasn't maintained by the government. And so one of the parents came out and started protesting and saying, like, the government's got to do something about these schools. That parent went to jail for the rest of their life. So, see what I mean? It's not that it's not there. It's just that different governments have different ways of stamping that shit down. Right. And this is especially true in certain countries overseas. But the same is true here. They have ways of stamping us down. Look at Trudeau and the truckers and shutting down their bank accounts. You know, look at just half the stuff that's going to end up happening. Like, this is the inevitable course of a mentality of control. This is what it has to do. But that mentality of control is driven by the mentality of need and fear. And we forget that. And so this is all going to continue on in the path that it's going. I'd like to make a prediction. I mentioned it to Andrew in the chat. We had a little bit of a chuckle, but I called it last time. And I'm going to say it again. I think Trump's going to win 2024. What's worse is that if he doesn't, I don't think his side is going to accept the loss. I think that we have another civil war coming in the States.
I really hope he doesn't run. Because, oh God. The thing is, like, everyone, all the big, the deep fucking Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, everyone running the behind the scenes sort of thing, in control of the, media and whatnot, definitely want him to run. So many more people tune into those situations, the debates, just keeping tabs on what's happening. If he's running, like, everyone who's up there fucking loves the fact that there's a good chance he's going to run. And so, and as much
He's
as
profitable.
Yeah, like CNN, MSNBC, they're like, fuck Trump. They're like, but definitely run. And like, if you win, that's okay too. Cause like, we don't really give a fuck because we make a shitload of money off of ads when you're running. And that's like, they get to do a 24-hour news cycle basically just called What's Happening with Trump. And
Yeah.
oh God. And they pitch this thing, and it fascinates me that people get so caught up in, one side over the other, as if that's the issue. Like the issue's the left, the issue's the right. It's like all the same fucking masquerade. It's fascinating that people actually point to one side over the other, thinking
So I have a
that
question for
that's,
you. Then here's my
yeah.
question. Okay. Knowing this, understanding that the mentality of control, of egotism, of trying to establish your value, comparison, competition, all that stuff, fear, and the need to survive. Okay? Understanding how powerful that is. Looking at the world around you, do you really think that everything that's happening is the product of some nefarious plan and not the product of just mass stupidity and selfishness? Like, this is where I've come to. Like, I've looked at the whole Illuminati thing, the Bilderbergers, all of that stuff. I've watched it for years. And I think their greatest playing card is the fact that we are so willing to think that they are that all powerful. I think while they may influence decisions in terms of the economy and stuff like that, it's our day-to-day shit that makes that possible. And we just disempower ourselves by going, oh, but look, they're changing the economy. They're making decisions that make them wealthier. Yeah, because you will go out and buy something fucking useless for $20.99 that was made for 99 cents, and you'll do it on credit. And they know it. And they couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, the more I see how easily manipulatable people are, the less I think that there's someone actually doing it externally, and the more it's just us, like, punching ourselves, thinking the fist doesn't belong to me, sort of thing. Like that's what I'm starting, because like we are, it is rooted in where we place our attention, where we place our money, what we do day to day.
Okay. So that being said, and the realization that none of this is divided, expand that image to, instead of just punching ourselves in the face, having hundreds of millions of fucking fists punching ourselves in the face. Because it's just one thing doing the same mechanism on different scales. Because we're huge. This is just you. That's what this is. On the bigger level that you're not willing to look at because you're too busy focusing on the little level, right? But it's all the same mentality. It's all just the ripples from person to person to person over time. It's the exact same thing we've been talking about. Exact same thing as we've been talking about. This is why my attitude towards this, my tone when it comes to talking about this shit is a little nonchalant. And it's just because while I'm aware of how much fallout is going to come from this, while I'm aware of how much suffering is going to come from this as it continues on, and already has come, like, understand, we've seen nothing but fucking suffering for 2,000 years as a result of this mentality, if not longer. I know longer, right? So all that aside, the suffering comes from attachment to this. The suffering starts to cease as you let it go and you start to have insights about how to sustain yourself, as you start to come across other people who want to step away from this as well. And that's what this is about. Despite all the carrots, all the threats of the stick, despite all the influences, deciding for yourself, no, I got to start from ground up. I have to do this for me and recognize what is real and what is not, and what are my priorities, because I am not just here to feel better. That's how I fall for those carrots. That's it. That's the only change that we can make. That's what this is. You notice we never really talk about the system, because to me, it's secondary, if not tertiary, to what's actually at the power behind all this, what's actually at play, which is our mentality, your mentality.
Yeah, and that's I think zeitgeist I think the end of that like kind of gave me goosebumps is after it went through, I think the three situations, at least in the version that I saw that it talked about. I think it was like 9/11, the Fed, and one other thing. It ended with, well, what is the sort of solution of this is the lack of identity, the letting go of the divisive mentality, the recognition that we're all in this together, that we are all one organism, infinitely expressed, perceiving itself as separate. And like, I was not expecting that movie to end like that. And I was like, oh, fuck. Oh, because that's what it comes to. And everyone's like, I know we talk about this all the time. And like, it both fascinates me and doesn't, given the environmental factors, how little people recognize that that's the root of it. But everyone is looking every other direction. And so like in that movie, it's talking about the same sort of recognition that we get to at the end of this. But it seems like almost everyone is settling on some superficial thing within a mentality as being sort of a solution, and not recognizing that it's just the mentality that drives this, because that mentality drives everything. It drives our desire to buy shit we don't need. The whole Fight Club thing. They spend money you don't have to buy shit you don't need to impress people you don't like. Like that whole thing, as the individual perception of me is the idea that my value goes up as my bank account goes up, goes away. There isn't so much desire for all of those things that allows us to be so easily, manipulated and contorted and shifted. And as much as, before you were saying eventually they're going to be in our mind and be able to do that. Like they already kind of are. They already have, not inside necessarily, but they're able to push narratives that you are kind of forced into, not forced, but close to forced, based on how you perceive yourself and your need for certain things, into acting certain ways. So like they already do have some of that control to a degree.
To the point where they know us so well. We are so predictable. So this is something that companies have been doing now for years. And I know because I was in the marketing business, and this is something that we used to consider. So let's say here's a perfect example. So there was this guy in the States, and I remember this was a great story because it hit the news, and he was pissed. He was really upset. He ended up getting a flyer from, I think it was Walmart, and he had a membership at Walmart and all that. And of course, every store you have a membership at, or if you have one of those cards, they're tracking all your purchases according to the information they know about you, your age, where you live, gender, all that stuff, right? And so what they do is they've learned to anticipate what it is you're going to buy based on what you've already purchased and your age and all of this other fun stuff. And so this guy all of a sudden starts getting advertisements for like diapers and all kinds of other baby stuff. And he's like, what the fuck is happening? Sure enough, unbeknownst to him, his teenage daughter was pregnant and had been going to the store to buy things without him knowing. And that's how he found out. That was how he found out, because they were predicting what her purchasing would be going forward. And they do this all the time because we're that predictable. Because we are that predictable. This was actually interesting. This is part of the plot of Captain America, Winter Soldier. They were talking about the fact that they had developed an algorithm, Hydra, the evil people, basically knowing everything that we were purchasing, everything that we were learning, everything that we had been exposed to in terms of social influences, as well as everything we'd ever expressed online, everything in social media, all this other stuff. And they had basically developed an algorithm to tell who would ever question the rule of Hydra, so they could wipe them all out in one go. And they were saying ever question, like we can see it happening 5 years down the road based on these behavioral patterns. It was creepy, but that's exactly the direction we're going with artificial intelligence. If you think about what artificial intelligence is offering the ability to do, it's to process complex bits of information and find underlying behaviors, right? Like years ago, they came up with the technology, not just to identify you according to facial recognition, but to identify you by your walk, by your gait. They can actually identify you by how you walk using artificial intelligence, because everybody's walk is distinctive. Right. So again, it's just a matter of how much they can process and how willing we are to go into their places where they control.
Okay. Something weird just happened. My live from TikTok. So for those listening, I go live on Instagram and TikTok every time we do one of these lives. Just got removed for a week. My live access on TikTok got removed for a week for misinformation. Your live access was suspended for violating our integrity and authenticity policy. We don't allow content that, one, spreads misinformation that may cause harm to an individual or community of a larger public. Two, spreads misleading media that distorts the truth and may cause harm to the subject of the video, other individuals, or society. Visit our community guidelines for more information. Fuck. That's like, oh, that's sketchy.
Still going hard on Twitch and YouTube though.
Fuck yeah. And we're still live on Instagram live over here. But holy shit. Yeah, I looked over just now and I saw there was like this is what it looks like.
But here's the thing, is that that's reported by someone. Okay. So this is the thing, is that in Nazi Germany, the biggest asset that Hitler had was the population that was willing to work with him. He actually had people that were willing to police their neighbors. That was the biggest problem. This happened during the Inquisition too. Like the biggest danger were the people around you willing to turn you in. And so this is why 10, 15 years ago on buses everywhere, you would start seeing these posters that would say, if you see something, say something. And they'd have like this phone number. It's like, if you see anything, say something. It's just like, holy shit, you were really opening up the options here. And so that really is something that's used a lot in terms of allowing us to police ourselves. Because after a certain mentality, we will. I always refer to it as the inner Nazi, right? But you just had one. Somebody came across and went, that doesn't make me feel good. This is against the system. And I believe in the system because it makes me feel secure. Report that motherfucker. And they did. So the system doesn't even need to police us. That's the problem.
Damn. Oh man. Yeah, because we very much saw that during COVID. You know, you said something that was like, and I wouldn't even say like definitive things, but I was questioning it the whole time that it was happening. And I would talk to people and I'd be like, you know, do you really think that all this happening, like, do you really think it's the way that it is? Do you really think that they know what they're talking about with this? Could it be that, you know, all this stuff isn't quite what they're saying that it is? Like, there's more and more studies coming out that it's impacting certain types of individuals significantly more. Like, do you really think 6-year-olds need a vax? You really think healthy 26-year-olds need a vax? And you're like, it's not about you, it's about everyone else. And meanwhile, it's like getting the vax actually makes it worse because I had symptoms, as you said a couple months ago or a year ago now.
Season one.
Yeah. Like it hides the symptoms. So as you travel around with the vax, you're actually more likely to spread it. Whereas if you didn't have it, you would feel the symptoms. So then you would know that you had it, as opposed to, you know, having no symptoms and pushing it around. But so I would bring stuff like that up and people would be like, oh, you fucking conservative piece of shit. Like you don't care about anyone but yourself. And I was like, oh my God, I promise you, I'm not like fucking hardcore conservative, but like, God damn, there is something happening here that's just weird. It was one of the first times in my life that I've gone through that. Just like, this isn't making much sense. And it seems like there's a lot of people benefiting from like even that question. Like, do you maybe wonder if there's an ulterior motive here to pushing vaccine that they're about to make a shitload of money off of, that the ones telling you that you need it are the ones making a shitload of money off it? I'm not even making any assumption here. I'm just saying, like, you ever wonder, like, doesn't that make you think for a split second? Like,
Couldn't be.
there's something kind of weird going on. Like the ones telling me I have to get it are about to make a fuckload of money off of me getting it. Isn't that like
Afraid?
Yeah. Isn't that a little bit alarming to you? Like
It would be if I wasn't so afraid.
Yeah.
Priorities, right? If I'm afraid for my life, I'm not really thinking about the person who's trying to take my money. Right? It really just comes down to priority. And so when we are afraid, we're very easy to take advantage of. And we know this. We know this. We understand this. Like we get that this is a principle in marketing. We understand that people are easy to drive through fear and a sense of lack. We get this. It's not like this is news to anyone. It's just that we don't like the idea that it's being used against us frequently because it makes us feel disempowered. More importantly, it makes us aware of the fact that perhaps there's some shit that we should be dealing with. But I just want to get my new laptop. I just want to buy my new Tesla. I just want to identify as an environmentalist.
And I guess, and a lot of the arguments I would get is like, okay, I don't care as much about that. Like if it even helps a little, it's worth it. That sort of thing. Like we're settling for fucking bottom of the barrel type things. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe it'll help a tiny bit. It's not going to hurt. And it's like, maybe it will. Like, why do you assume that it's not going to hurt? Like, where do you think their intentions lie if they're about to make a ton of money off of this? Do you think they really give a fuck if some people experience some repercussions, some side effects to this? No, of course not. Because if you experience some side effects, you go back to them and give them more of your money. So when you start seeing things like that, it's like you gotta, not that you gotta, but like, I can't believe people don't fucking question and wonder about that. Like you start experiencing some side effects, like they get benefit from that too. They get benefit from you being sick. They get benefit from you being unhealthy. They get benefit from you being overweight. They get benefit from people being on the edge of dying. Like
being depressed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, there's a whole industry. That's the thing. This is why I liked your video last week about our business plan. About the fact that the business plan is just terrible. It's just terrible because we're saying you don't need anything. You are in fact enough all on your own. You don't need us. You don't need an answer from somebody else who claims to be enlightened. None of that. You just need to self-reflect, give yourself some space, maybe, love yourself a little and stop trying to identify with everything that you think gives you value or certainty or anything like that. That's really it. So it's not great in terms of a repeat business model. But why do we think that, other than the fact that everybody else is fucking operating from a place of selfishness? Everybody else is trying to take advantage of that need. This is, again, a foundational fucking thing in business. Find a need, fill a need, right? Like that's exactly it. And so we keep finding more needs to the point where we're coming up with things that people didn't even know were needs, right? Like Facebook. Facebook capitalized on something that people didn't even recognize that they wanted. All of a sudden, it's like, look, you can be connected to people online. Well, that went from being a tool to being a need because all of a sudden, through the ego, all of these friends give me value. They even call them fucking friends, man. Like, it's just so weird. Like, I have 10,000 friends I've never met. They're not your friend. But that's the point, is that if you need to think you have friends and that gives you more value, then that's a giant juicy fucking carrot, isn't it? What's worse, followers. Oh my God, that one gets me. You have this many followers. Oh,
they really do use terminology that's I don't know, just like kind of creates distortion in and of itself and creates this idea of value based on arbitrary metrics and numbers. And that's something, it's funny you bring that up of like friends and how many people do you actually know? Like that's something my parents couldn't wrap their heads around back like early Facebook days when my siblings and I had stuff like 2010, 2012. They're like, because it wasn't as, mainstream as everyone knows about it now. And they were like, so how many people, like if you saw some of these people on the street, would you say hi? We're like, probably acknowledge them. Yeah, like some of them, and they couldn't rationalize. Like, it says they're your friends, but like you're not actually friends. And we're like, yeah, it's not really like to say it's like in-person friends and Facebook friends or a different thing, but they become sort of an overlap and a lot of I don't know, just like confusion between like what is I want to say like what is real and what isn't, but it's like, that's always up for debate, but online versus in person, that whole thing. And now Facebook's trying to take it even farther, or Meta, into the metaverse and into virtual reality, thinking that, online friends weren't enough. And now it's, living in an alternate dimension where, they probably have even more control of everything, significantly more. But people are like running to that, thinking how cool all of that is. Like, fucking scary.
It gets worse. It gets worse. Okay, so now we have the rise of fucking Meta, right? The VR universe and that whole technology, and that's been trying to catch on forever. But we are also armed with this mentality of egotism and of course the hell that's happening around us that we block ourselves from in terms of like just hiding in games. And this is something that happens a lot, like massively multiplayer online RPGs. They've been around for a long time. I remember fucking EverQuest, like back in like 2000 or something like that. Anyway, it's been around for a long time. And I've seen so many people just get lost in this, where they start to identify as the character that they have in the game. They're going out of their way to talk to only people that they interact with in the game. Minecraft. Holy fucking shit. There are so many kids that are so lost in Minecraft. I remember having a client, it was this kid who had never been camping, but was telling me about going camping in Minecraft. So sad. It was just so sad. Like, they were talking to me about playing in the backyard, and I'm like, hey, that's fantastic, until they mentioned that it was in Minecraft. And why? Well, because you're surrounded by egotism, because the fact is that most other children suck because they are raised by egotistical parents. So they've learned how to judge and compare and compete and all that other fun stuff. This is something that my daughter goes through all the time. She's like, why are my friends so judgmental? I'm like, because they're teenagers and raised by judgmental people in a judgmental society where everything is judging them. Welcome to the party. Right? So that's difficult. And so what do? We get lost in our phones. We get lost in fucking Farmville. We get lost in all these virtual environments that pull us out of reality, because reality is fucking terrifying. So they've got us going that way too, right? It's not that they need to take advantage of us. They just need to give us ways to run from ourselves, because that's all we want. That is the biggest product in our society, escapism.
Yeah, and it's almost like with virtual reality and like video games into VR, AR type stuff. It's like when you take a step back and recognize that you're not what you think you are. It's like we're already sort of caught in this character right now. And as you said, like, escapism is one of our favorite current pastimes. Like, we're escaping from this character that we aren't even, but we believe that we are. And then we dig into, online multiplayer games, identify with that. Then, like, that isn't quite enough, or there's more to get through that. And so it's like another layer into VR or whatever. And then we start to believe that we are that character. And that's where our value is measured, based on how we're perceived in the game. And then as that becomes oversaturated, who knows what other layer. It's like we keep digging in to identity, essentially deepening into identity, because, we believe this is what we are, and we're not crazy about this current situation. So we're trying to escape, whether it's into VR or off of Earth onto fucking Mars, something, as opposed to recognizing the reality of you here and now, what you actually are. But we've gotten so caught in this kind of layer of identity, believing this is what I am, that now our options are either basically just like to escape this somehow, because we believe this is what we are, and we aren't willing to question this sort of level of reality. And so we're just more and more trying to escape into things, and people are more than willing to take advantage of that desire to escape in whatever form that takes. And there's so many fucking forms that it takes.
That's just doing business, though, isn't it? Isn't that just business as usual? Isn't that exactly how we justify it? Oh, I got to eat, right? This is exactly what good business sense. And that's how we justify it. We really do. It's just business. Isn't that fun? And it's just become, I don't know, something that we've done for so long. Being self-serving and justifying being self-serving, justifying this mentality that I'm in this on my own. Fuck all y'all. It really is. That's it. Every man for himself. And it's just dominant. It's just taken over everything, because again, we appear to be divided. We see ourselves as divided. We don't recognize nobody's in it on their own. We all affect one another. All of us, regardless of how far you are, whatever it is you do changes everything. Changes everything. You may not think it's a lot, but in your entire lifetime, you have to remember it's a lot of change over an entire lifetime. It's a lot of change. One conversation can change the whole course of everything. Jesus Christ, one person getting shot ignited World War I. Doesn't take much. Enough pebbles cause an avalanche. Keep that in mind. Like, we are not disempowered. We don't lack the ability to change all of this and change it fast. It's just that we lack the mentality. We lack the responsibility. We lack the perception, or rather the awareness, that division is just a perception. And that the more we invest in that perception, the more division we get. And that's very much what we're getting. Shit tons of division. Division every way you can. And what do we keep doing? We keep investing in more fucking division. What religion are you? What nation do you identify? What do you believe in? How do you dress? How do you fucking identify? All this shit. It's all division, all of it. And it's just because we keep thinking like that's the path. Aha. That cell is going to offer me protection. It's like, no, motherfucker, it's still a prison. That's all it's going to do. Sure, it's going to make you feel secure, like a prison cell. Is that the kind of security that you want? Is it? Where you're afraid of all the other inmates that you can't even see because you're too busy staring at the walls of your own cell? You're afraid of shit that's not real. You're afraid of things that you're projecting based on your own fears. Largely, this is the problem with conversations like this, is we start to look at the system and all the shit that's working against us, and we actually start to feel like it fucking matters. Just because it's so big, and we don't recognize it got here through us. But you see immediately, well, no, it's been here forever. Yeah, it's still you. See the perspective? Immediately, you're like, well, no, this is me. And that's the mentality that fucks us. It's the mentality that enables NIMBY. Not in my backyard. It's all you. It's all you. The children that follow are you. The mess you're leaving now, you're leaving for you. That shift in mentality changes everything that we do. But anything short of that shift for its own sake won't work. It won't work. I've been looking at this forever. It just won't work. It won't take root. It's the reason that Occupy Wall Street fell, is because it divided itself. They couldn't even get along amongst themselves, regardless of the fact that they all knew something was fucking wrong.
They're still caught in that illusion, that perception of me. And they see, it's like everyone, not everyone, but most people can see something wrong, but because we overlook that, identity not being the truth of what we are, we look beyond that into everything else. So it's like we're missing the root. It's like we're standing on the root, looking out into the field or looking at the rest of the tree, thinking that that's what where the solutions are going to be found in everything external. And there's so many iterations of that people get caught up in thinking that everything outside of me has to change. But as you said, like that's what got us to this point, was that illusion, was that perception of identity. And so as long as we maintain that, no matter what we turn to, no matter what we look for, it's not gonna be able to take root, because we're not changing anything about the foundation of what's driving this system. Which so this brings me, and I know we got through past the money stuff, but I did want to come back to Bitcoin for a sec, because I see that both as something that is different, that could help in a sense, but at the same time, it's still one of those things, that people are standing on the root looking out to thinking, a lot of people who are big into the Bitcoin world are, think that that's the answer. Like, the money's broken, the system relies upon the money, fix the money, fix the system sort of thing. But, if it does take root, if Bitcoin becomes world reserve currency, something, it's still within a mentality, within the same fucking mentality. And the people, like, I see some motherfuckers on the Bitcoin side, like Bitcoin maxi side of things, who are deep into identity, like very deeply rooted in identity. And so as much as it's I don't know, much better money than what we have right now, it's still, if it's utilized within the system of identity, like there's going to be plenty of pitfalls as well. And especially within as massive of a system as we have now that relies upon control, like, I don't know. It makes me wonder how that would play out. But I'm kind of curious your thoughts.
I think Bitcoin, as well as Ethereum, is kind of a step in the right direction. But I think, again, it's distorted by the mentality. Exactly what you're saying. Like, how many people invested in Bitcoin are doing so because they want to be Bitcoin billionaires? Like, how many people invested in Ethereum are there because they want to be fucking quote unquote whales? Right. And that's largely the problem. This is something that you and I have kind of talked about, and it's something that very much I'd like to move in the direction of, in terms of having our own cryptocurrency, but also in terms of like being closer to something like Ethereum, in that it can also be used for contracts. It can actually be used for applications. It can be used for a number of things. It can be used to transfer information as well as value. And doesn't that make a lot more fucking sense? Right. But to me, I think it would be more interesting to me to create something that owning part of, like we were talking about the DAO, for example, the Dualistic Unity DAO that we're working towards having programmed at some point. We're owning a token in the DAO. Wouldn't necessarily, like, it would have value, sure, but short of that, because the DAO itself would be taking all of the value that it has and putting it into resources that continue to yield more each and every month. Owning a token would then therefore give you a monthly revenue rather than just a one lump sum. Like, sure, you could sell it, but owning it would give you a monthly income. So that way you could continue to live at a reasonable salary. And then all of a sudden we can create more tokens as we start to get more resources. And so everybody is being given, let's just say, $4,000 a month, as opposed to, something that's like, I could sell this for billions, or if I owned more of them, that kind of thing. And it gives you a voting share. So you can actually vote on the resources and where they're going to be invested, and help in the growth of dualistic unity and all that fun stuff. So it's more of a community and participatory type of currency where everybody isn't necessarily trying to get the most. Everyone is benefiting from the growing pool, from the growing resources, from the growing investments and everything else. And that could be investments in things like land. It could be investments in agriculture. It could be invested in cryptocurrency, liquidity pools, staking, that kind of thing. Like, there's so many things that if we had the mentality and the wherewithal, we could do together, and all of us could benefit if we could just get out of this mentality of needing to be fucking crypto billionaires.
Yeah, because it's that mentality that still drives desire to own a bunch and for it to do well is still driven by, me, my desire to have a bunch and, be able to prove everyone wrong who didn't believe in it, sort of thing. But yeah, now granted, you never know what people are going to do with their money, but based on the mentality that we have and historical evidence, it's most likely going to be utilized for egotistical things that give me more value having certain things. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you think, because there's a lot of back and forth, and just like with Bitcoin specifically, like eventually the system, I feel like, is gonna try and take hits at it. Like, I don't. Do you see that as?
Yeah, until they control enough of a percentage of it, for sure. Because I guarantee that's already happening.
You think they're gonna just try and own a massive chunk?
Oh, I'm
of
surprised. I would be surprised if they're not already rapidly on their way to being over 50%. Like, for sure. And remember, like, this is corporations. They've been doing this forever. They understand how to buy other corporations using thousands of shell companies. Like, this isn't new business practice by any means.
So, say they do get over 50%. Like, are there things that they'd be capable of doing with it if they get more than that? Because if they do get to that point, like, they're gonna have to buy a bunch, I guess, if they haven't already. But as they, purchase more and more.
Oh, I don't just mean 50% of the Bitcoin. I expressed that incorrectly. 50% of the mining.
Oh,
right? Because remember, Bitcoin has one flaw, or rather one weakness. Anybody who owns over 51% of the nodes can actually alter Bitcoin. They can change the global ledger.
Can they really?
Absolutely. Because the global ledger is based on the majority of the nodes confirming the ledger. Anybody who owns over 51% of the nodes can change the ledger, and the other 49% will validate accordingly.
Huh. So you think that's their most likely avenue?
I think it's inevitable that they're going to find a way to bring it down. And admittedly, like, I'm not going to lie, as much as I love Bitcoin for what it is and the concept that it introduced, it's super limited. Like, I'm not going to say Bitcoins are not limited. Transactions take fucking forever. And there's only a certain amount of information that you can transfer through those transactions, right? As opposed to something like Ethereum, which is, in my opinion, vastly superior to Bitcoin as a tool. Because while it can still be used as a carrier of value, it can also be used, as I said, for smart contracts, for apps, for things like that, for decentralized platforms like DTube and things like that, where it's decentralized video streaming. Like, that's huge in terms of a technology. But Bitcoin being deflationary is very much what makes it so important. The fact that there will never be more Bitcoin. Now, if we could just take that and do it with something else, like, it's so funny that we haven't, right? But if we could take that and do something else with it, where it's, again, not the same model of everybody wants to be a fucking crypto billionaire, but it'd be almost like, well, it'd be an underground economy in its own. The model I was talking about really would, if people could just get behind it and recognize, like, I only need a certain amount per month, right? Then that would end up being its own, again, resource. Like, the government is something that we all invest in. We forget that, right? But the government itself really is what I'm talking about, except that they've taken way more power over time. The government originally, the federal government especially, was only ever there to keep the peace and facilitate trade. And that's what they were meant to do, is to take people's tax dollars and whatnot and invest them into roads and hospitals and things that yield resources. And basically what I'm saying, things that yield resources for the common good. Right? It's not like somebody in the population is like, I want more of the hospital for me. Right? So we do this all the time. We actually operate under this mentality all the time. It's just that when it comes to money, we tend to think of ourselves. And it's because we still have to pay for food and so on and so forth. And I think a large part of it is just the fact that we're so fucking tired of being poor and desperate and hungry that we envision being fucking millionaires where all of that goes away. This is why the majority of people who win the lottery are poor within 5 to 10 years again. It's because the mentality that they're going into that with, right? They're desperate for more, for a cessation of their pain. And so they just spend. They never have the idea of organizing their money. They have never had the idea of putting it into something that's going to yield over and over and over again over years. And I'm not talking about investing in the stock market by any means, but having a chunk of land that produces fruit and vegetables for even just the local economy, right? Like even people growing microgreens at home and selling it to local restaurants are making good money. Like there's a number of ways that you can make money that don't necessarily involve you having to be a millionaire, and that don't necessarily involve you having to invest in Microsoft or some other corporation that's going to fucking rape the rest of humanity. Right? There's a lot of ways for you to get by without necessarily doing what everybody else is telling you to do, because it's this fucking short way, right? Like that's it. But you need to be creative, and you have to be responsible, and you have to be willing to look outside the box and step out on your own and make your own fucking path and question some shit, rather than just look for somebody who's like, do this, it's going to make you money in 10 days. That's why those assholes make so much fucking money. That's why people like Tate get away with things like Hustlers Universities, because we're all fucking desperate.
Yeah, and so that really does bring it back to our own mentality and how we perceive ourselves, which is what will allow the shift to begin to unravel, is that shift in our perspective of ourselves.
It's happening now. See, this is it. This is what dualistic unity is at the end of the day. It's a shift in perspective. For me, it was a shift in my perspective that inevitably led to a conversation that expanded and expanded and expanded over years. But that took me running into fucking hundreds of people who would say fucking mean and derogatory shit just because I was talking about things they didn't want to hear. But what's funny is that everything I'm saying right now, everything that people are like, yeah, fuck system, is shit I've been saying for 20 fucking years. And now people want to hear it. Why do they want to hear it? Because it's relevant, because it's necessary, because it's getting impossible to avoid. That's it. That's all it is. And so this conversation is inevitable. We're just having it. So I'm stoked to be in that particular position where we can have this conversation and be a part of that necessary change. But it is a swing in the pendulum. Remember, every dictatorship inevitably leads to revolution. Every dictatorship. We have been through this cycle before. We've been through this cycle where we have allowed ourselves to be basically shepherded fucking into a certain direction until finally we're like, Jesus Christ, there's a slaughterhouse there. And we wake up and we go the other direction. And then we create our own slaughterhouse and do it to someone else. And that's the problem with a revolution, is it goes in fucking circles unless we address the mentality that created it. And the mentality that created it is unfortunately fear and need. Fear, need, identity, division, all that shit. It's all the cornerstone of this. It doesn't change until we do. And there's no way to go out and force people to change, because isn't that exactly the problem? Isn't that exactly the problem? And so all we can do is just have this conversation, hope that it gets traction, just keep planting seeds. And if it does get traction, all of a sudden you've got something growing that everybody around you has never seen before. And like, the fuck is that? And you're like, well, let me tell you about it. And you can, not that you're chasing them down, but there's something that they can't help but notice, like a giant fucking billboard in Times Square saying you are God and we are one. So this is what this is. And this is kind of the path that I envision. And I'm really looking forward to being part of it. And I just wanted to mention to everybody who is listening that I'm very excited about the time period that we're in. It's taken me 20 years to get there. I need you to understand that. I was pissed and scared and angry. I've gone through all of this shit over the years. As you may have noticed, I'm aware of a lot of these nightmares. We haven't even touched a fucking percentage of them today. We've only talked about some of the surface stuff. There's other stuff. And yet I am still not scared. I am very excited because, again, necessity breeds change. We can only put it off for so long, and we are as I said before, coming to the end of the party. It's becoming obvious that the party is coming to an end, regardless of everybody who's been benefiting from spiking the punch.
Yeah, it seems like it's becoming just more and more in our faces. And that's what I mean, yeah, I'm fucking grateful that we're having this conversation too, because, recognizing, and it's been recognized by many people for a very long time, that there is a root to this. Everyone's caught up even asking questions like, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What's going on? And like, when you start to recognize that you are life, that those questions change. It's not, why am I here? What's the meaning of life? It's like, what do you mean? You're life. You're not experiencing life. You don't have a life. You don't own a life. You're it. And life is reality. Life is all of this happening. And that's what you are. So that shifts inevitably as people start to reconcile with that recognition. It has to shift eventually. We can't maintain this sort of mentality through deeper recognitions like that. Letting go of the idea of what you think you are. Maybe not happen, overnight, but it certainly happens eventually. But yeah, before, I know we got like 20 minutes left or so. But yeah, this has been fun. I definitely wanted to dig into some of this today, but I'm curious. You said we're just even here you use scratching the surface of the nightmare. I'm just kind of curious what there's another I don't know if you got another tidbit of something that really not freaks you, but that's even, I don't know, deeper or darker than what we've been talking about here.
Sure. Okay. If you really want to go here, the reason I say that the system, the mentality needs to be transcended is because it can't be fought. It can't be fought. This is, I think, the really big problem in terms of your average American militiaman who's like, don't take away my guns because I got to fight a tyrannical government. Man, they don't give a fuck about you. I don't care if you have a tank or a bazooka. They have drones and shit. They can target you with a satellite. They don't fucking care, right? And this is very much the important thing. Like, none of your guns are going to keep you safe from the government suddenly, deciding that they're in control of you. But they're not everywhere. So try and remember that they're going to stick to the places that are easily controlled. And those places are always the places where people tend to go when they want to be shepherded in a direction. So just don't go there. Just leave that alone. But keep this in mind. Fighting them is what they want. Every video you've ever seen of the police beating someone up, it's always just, I'm sorry, I don't understand what's happening here. And you get a little tone in your voice. And you're like, aha, you're resisting arrest. And they beat the fuck out of you. Okay? Because they're armed with people who are terrified and given guns and very little education at the end of the day. And so they're easily threatened. And that's why a lot of cops don't know the law. People need to understand that. A police officer is not a fucking lawyer. They're not trained in the law. They're trained in enforcement of laws that they barely understand. So keep that in mind. But the government banks on that. You see, the government banks on the fact that the more oppressed you feel, the more likely it is that you're going to either get depressed and circle the suicide drain, or you're going to get pissed off. And they like it when you're pissed off, because then they can vilify you. They can say, oh, this person is unhinged, and they can do all the things they want with the media in terms of making you look like a goddamn nut. Okay. But they know how to control you. They know how to stop you. Like, this is true for crowds as well. Like, at some point, so let's say about 10 years ago, the military and now the government developed this wonderful little satellite dish thing, sits on top of a Hummer. And it basically shoots like an invisible micro ray that hits your nervous system and makes you feel like your skin is burning off. That's a thing for crowd control. It doesn't actually, burn you, but it makes you feel like your skin is burning off. These are things that are developed, or shotguns with taser bullets that hit you and stick into your skin, and then they fall. And as soon as they fall and pull the wire, it electrocutes you. So they're always looking for the fight, because that's the mentality that they're coming from. See, they're coming from fear. Arm up, escalate, right? We can't beat them that way. We can't win that, right? This is why a lot of the most effective protests have been nonviolent protests, right? Because as soon as there's violence in there, as soon as the media can vilify anyone, it undercuts everything. And this is why now you see a lot of these fuckers in black masks at these events where they're non-violent, right up until these fuckers in black masks show up. And I know here in Canada and now in the States, it's been often shown irrefutably that a lot of these fuckers in black masks are actually cops. That they're actually cops undercover there to make it look violent, so that way cops can move in and shut down that protest. So you see, they need you to react. They need you to react, because otherwise they can't vilify you and justify what they're doing. And that's really the only way to beat them. This is how Gandhi beat them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I think it makes sense too that they're gonna do everything they can, in their power, like going undercover into the crowd and like causing some violence, some pushback, some sort of dispute even. And then someone else reacts, and then all of a sudden, it's a violent protest. And they were able to infiltrate that. So I think just bearing that in mind, that like those things are always out there. They're always trying to do everything they can to justify their future actions that they'll take in order to make it seem like, we don't have any power. But there's like that whole, the whole internal impact of things through changing yourself changes reality, changes because you are everyone. There is one mind that we're sort of accessing, that as your mind changes, everyone's mind changes. And so I think understanding that and like the impacts that you have through just having conversations, not needing to go out and do physical things so much, just it happens in your day-to-day interactions, letting go of your perception of yourself, like that's the actual thing that's going to have impact on that. And yet, the ego hears that and it's like, what do you mean that's not doing it? We got to do stuff, or else I got to show that I care about this. And so it almost infiltrates every aspect of things, and then just kind of self-destructs on itself, because the ego trying to interact with the ego, trying to fight the ego. It's the same sort of mentality, even if you're coming at it with, quote unquote, good intentions, coming at it from the perspective of things need to change, but I need to change it. Things need to be different because I know, like, that is feeding the same beast, thinking that it's fighting it, thinking that it's disempowering it, and it's just empowering it. It's just bolstering it. And so it can't be that. So it makes sense when you start to see that that's the case, that it starts with you.
As above, so below, right? It's the same lesson we've been talking about in terms of talking to family members or new people about not identifying. Can't assault them. See, it really does come down to how you talk to them, because if they can vilify you, they've stopped listening, right? So if your approach is with open hands, as Sunny said, makes it very difficult to vilify you, right? And so that's all this is about. See, we don't need the system to agree with us. We're going to build our own network of resources. We're going to build our own community. We're going to build exactly what the system was meant to be, without all of the fallout, all of the distortion of the ego that's been created over time. We'll just do it under the surface. We'll do it in our own pocket, and we'll do so in ways that the system can reconcile, because it's under the heading of Dualistic Unity LLC. We're going to beat them at their own game, and then we're going to be an example that there is a different kind of game that can be played, where nobody has to win. Nobody has to be better than anyone else. It's just fun to be a part of. And that's it. That's all this is. It's not about force. It's just about changing yourself. You're already doing it. And it's not just you. there are so many other yous. And this is what we're seeing on Dualistic Unity every day now. More and more people out there going, holy shit, this conversation's happening. I've been looking for this forever. Or worse, I gave up on ever finding this conversation. And here we are. Nothing makes me happier than being able to respond to somebody who's like, oh, I just wish there were people to talk to about this, and go, well, you're in luck. We have a huge Discord community and over 170 Patreon members that chat with us weekly on group discussions. We are growing. And our voice is going to get louder as we sit in the back and just sing to ourselves about how awesome life is, while everybody else is too busy with the wailing and the gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun ride, an interesting ride. Absolutely. But yeah, no, I like that it all circles as much as we dug into all sorts of deep, dark things going on. It's like at the end of the day, it's not about focusing on that. It's about focusing on you and where you're at and what you're doing in your day to day, things you're holding on to, the ability to let go of them more and more quickly, the willingness to not need to be perceived in any way, shape, or form in order to think that your value goes up from that, understanding that you don't need anything for your value to go up. You are as whole and complete as you could ever possibly be right now. And that's easier to see when you're not so caught up in trying to be seen as more valuable by people who utilize that sort of mentality in order to feel more valuable and think that that's where it comes from. And it's always a shaky stool that you're standing on when you think that it comes from that. And that's the shift. That's how it changes. That's how it all comes tumbling down and then built back up differently, which I don't know, no one's really been able to do in a very, very long time. And yeah, but we're here talking about it. So
that's a great point, though. And I wanted to address this before we wrap up for the day, because the question really is, right, but how? Like, sure, okay, working on myself is going to change the world, right? But how? And it's ripples upon ripples upon ripples. Because again, all the change you're doing, all the conversation we have week to week with all the people in our community drives this podcast. And that podcast continues to grow, continues to become more enticing to advertisers, continues to become more enticing to other sources of income that we can bring in. You're helping inform the how. All you need to do is keep growing. And more of us are going to come together with ideas on how to come together. We're going to make this grow just by virtue of the fact that there's enough demand for it. See, that's it. Andrew and I are trying to create something here based on our mentality alone, not needing you. And if it works, it works, but it really comes down to whether it's going to work. And at the moment, it's working. It's just got to keep going, right? Just got to keep going. And if it's not based on trying to get anywhere, then it's just happening by virtue of enthusiasm for your own path. Like, I enjoy these episodes because I enjoy this conversation. I enjoy Dualistic Unity because I enjoy people, especially people who are recognizing that their value is immeasurable, right? That's what this is to me. This isn't a business. This isn't a path. This isn't my way to fix the world. My world is great. I just want to share that with others, right? That it's not impossible, regardless of the darkness that you come from, that kind of thing. And so as long as we're doing it for that, the how will present itself. We said this in our manifestation workshop. If anybody hasn't caught that, actually, it was one of our earliest workshops. It's a good one. The problem with manifestation is we always try to think of how it's going to happen, right? You don't know the how. All you're doing is looking at things through your very limited imagination. The fact is that you are manifestation. Each and every moment, you are manifesting your mentality. You're embodying your mentality. Reality is reflecting what you are. That's it. You don't have to try and get somewhere. It's the freedom you feel now that manifests freedom around us. We're just doing that together.
Yeah, the how becomes a lot less important when you realize that it just comes down to you and what you're doing in each and every moment. It's not so much about getting to a spot. It's about allowing it to unfold and like being it along the way as your perspective of yourself shifts. The things that you think you're going to manifest aren't as important, because it's that perspective of yourself that you hold on to that drives that need to manifest certain things that you think are going to raise your value. So the simple shift in that perspective, those things that you want don't matter quite so much anymore, because you know that they're not going to have impact on that value. And so then the how is just, it's just you, and things start happening because of how you're seeing yourself, not because you need them to happen, but just because that's how it goes. As your experience of freedom gets stronger and stronger, it gets strong. Your experience of freedom gets stronger and stronger, and your experience includes your environment and everything else, and everyone in that environment. And so, like, we get so caught up in manifesting things for me, like I need this thing. But if you can embody freedom, and your environment becomes freer, the people you interact with aren't so, they're not walking around with sticks 3 feet up their asses so much. Isn't that way more beautiful of a thing to manifest than a new car? Right? Like, if people around you are actually interacting differently, simply not because you wanted them to change or tried to get them to change, but simply because you changed, isn't that the most beautiful thing you could ever possibly manifest? Is a shift in your reality through a shift in your mentality?
I would like to
Makes
say,
sense
from
to me.
somebody who's experiencing that, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, it comes back to you, and I'm glad that we went in and out of everything in this conversation. I still have some more things I want to get into eventually. Maybe next week or maybe in a couple weeks we'll get back into these types of things, because at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know, interesting to talk about and whatnot, but it comes back to you. There's not some golden way to change the system outside of recognizing that you're it. And as you change, it changes. And as you drop that desire for it to happen overnight, get a little more patient, recognize the reality of what's really going on, and realize, even if you don't necessarily understand the ins and outs, the depths of the system, comes back to you every single time. Always comes back to you and the mentality you embody in each and every moment.
Absolutely. Well said. And that's it. It's an act of faith. As with everything, not faith in something, just faith. And that's enough. So that all said, we are going to wrap up. I do want to mention that we're going to be continuing in 15 minutes on Patreon. It's $5 a month if you would like to join us. So you get to chat with us up to 3 times a week. I think it comes out to like 30 cents an hour or something like that. The groups are fantastic. You can ask us questions. You can bring up ideas. You can share your challenges and your victories with us. You can meet some of the rest of the community, which is really where the power of this is. And we just appreciate you joining us today. As I said earlier, if you're tired of the ads on Twitch, we just discovered that you can subscribe on Twitch for, I'm not sure what the amount is, it's a small amount, and then you don't have to see ads on Twitch. So that's a solution to that. But thanks so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. Andrew, I got to say, I didn't see that conversation coming. I'm glad that we had it, though, because we live in the world and there's a lot of fucked up shit happening, and it's good to get some context and some perspective of it from time to time.
Absolutely. All right. I will talk to you and some of you in about 15 minutes. Looking forward to it. Bye, everyone.